Welcome back to the next episode of the series, Let's Write a Novel. So far we've talked about getting your idea started, then we went on and we started talking about character and world building and the importance of that. So by this point, if you're following along, I expect that you probably got something down on paper, or the screen as the case may be. And that means it's about time that we start talking about the dreaded aspect of writing, the thing that all writers, yada yada yada, nightmare. Right, writer's block. That's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about how to avoid it, how to break through it. Oh, before we go on, I'm Evan Curry. I'm going to include information down below just in case somebody's come along through the algorithm somehow and doesn't know who I am. But honestly, as I said last time, I really doubt that's the case. So, yeah, we're just going to jump right into it. Writer's block. Everybody's going to get it at some point or another. Techniques for avoiding it, techniques for getting through it are going to vary wildly. And not every technique is going to work for you. I'm going to give you some things that have worked for me and should work if you have I don't necessarily want to say the discipline to use them, although in some cases that's definitely part of it. But let's just say they have the potential to work for you. I don't ever want to say anything will work for somebody completely because that's just not how it works. Now, for avoiding writer's block, which, trust me, that's where you want to be. You want to avoid it as much as you possibly can. An ounce of prevention is definitely worth the weeks of frustration of trying to get through writer's block. One of the best things that I've got is when I've got a really good flow going in a story, and I write along to a section and I think, I've just got a few paragraphs left before, and then I know exactly what's going to happen. So I'll finish those up and I'll go to bed. No, time out. Don't do that. If you've got a few paragraphs left and you know where you're going with them, and the end of your writing session is coming up, stop. Leave those paragraphs for the next session. Because, as with most things in the world, whether or not they actually have physical mass, inertia is a real thing. And if you can get some momentum going, you'll be surprised at how fast your mind can come up with new ideas to keep moving. It's always easier to keep moving than it is to start. So leave yourself a little bit of stuff that you know what you're going to do for the next session so you can get off to a running start. That's the best technique I've got for avoiding writer's block, short of just knowing the entire story front to back before I even get started, which does happen from time to time, and those stories are a pleasure to write. For me, in my original material, Steam Legion was almost like that, where I think it took me 5 weeks from beginning to end to write that entire novel. That one was just a pleasure to write. The sequel has been a non-starter so far. Very frustrating. Okay, so we've talked about how to avoid it. My most effective technique anyway. But you're not going to be able to avoid it every time. So what are techniques for pushing through it? Well, one of the best, for a certain value of best, is simply to write. Even if it's just 100 words or a dozen words, sit down every day and write something on it. Eventually you will chip away at that wall and you will break through it. Another technique that definitely has its uses is grabbing something like this. This is it's just a simple hourglass. It's about a 25-minute timer basically, and the idea is when you flip it over and it starts going, you write for 25 minutes. Doesn't matter what you write for 25 minutes. When it's done, you stop, you go, and you take a break. You come back, you flip it over, you write for 25 minutes. It does improve productivity because you've got that short-term goal, and particularly if you're a fast typist, you can actually get quite a lot done in 25 minutes. For me, it's on the order of close to 1,500 words. Now, other methods of breaking through, I tend to have multiple novels open at once. At the moment I have 3. And they also tend to have different genres. Okay? I try not to write in 2 extremely similar genres at the same time because you get some cross-pollination where they kind of interfere with one another. I think you can actually see that in the Odyssey and Silver Wings series, where there is an error in one of the Silver Wings books where an Odyssey character shows up. I'm not sure if that was edited out or not. I don't think I did. I don't plan on it if I didn't, because it's one of those things that it's a neat little Easter egg. It's a mistake that made it to publishing, and I don't have an issue with that. They happen no matter how well edited you get things done. Now, but in general, that means that I like to have a modern sci-fi, a space sci-fi, and maybe something more fantasy-ish on the go. Right now, I've got a modern sci-fi here. I've got a space sci-fi in. This is the Infinity Affliction. This is the modern sci-fi. I have a space sci-fi in Fraternal Orders, and I've got a superhero in Heroic. So it gives me 3 very different genres. When I get burned out on one, I can switch to something very different. This can be difficult, keeping them in mind, keeping the plots in your head, and not having to go back and reread constantly. But as you practice at it, you'll get better. When I first wrote Odyssey 1, I'm sure I reread Odyssey 1 must have been 100 times. Because I was constantly going back and rereading so that I could pick up and continue on. But at this point, I can generally keep the plot and the characters in my head without going back at all. So it's just a matter of practice. And in the end, that's pretty much what you're going to be stuck with when it comes to dealing with writer's block. It's going to be a matter of just get down and get through it. And more than likely, it's going to be chipping at it. You know, a few words here, a few words there. Just try and make a habit of sitting down and actually writing a little bit every day, even if it's only a couple dozen words. I wish I had miracle advice for writer's block, because then I wouldn't have the issue with it myself. But those techniques really did serve me well, and they still do. And if I find anything that works better, well, I'll let you guys know. Now, today we actually have some questions that I wanted to get to. So we're going to actually go and we're going to look at that. Tammy Fitzpatrick said, "Hi Clay. Incidentally, my name is Clay Evan Curry. I use my middle name as the writer's, as my nom de plume." She says, "I have two projects going, although at this point the second one is mostly still in the thinking stage. The first is the true story of a psychic woman who gives up a baby for adoption, her psychic experiences throughout her life, and the reconnection with that child 40 years later. My problem is in telling her of her psychic experiences. I can only write what she tells me, and sometimes the stories are basically one-liners. I've been told that some parts of it are reading more like a textbook than a story. I can't make up or try to fill in details because I wasn't there, and her memory isn't always full of detail. I'm kind of stuck on whether to drop some of those experiences from the story and focus more on the relationship between the mother and the daughter. But, from the reactions I've gotten so far, people want to hear about the psychic aspect. Any thoughts on that?" Well, my first thought right off the bat is, are you writing a novel or are you writing a biography? Because how you approach what you're working on is you really need to figure that out to begin with. If you're writing a biography, then you can be a little dry in places, and it's going to be okay. Although you may want to punch up some of the aspects of the psychic stories and so forth, if that's working to your audience. If you're writing a novel, remember that novels, even when they're based on real life stories, are based on real life stories. They're not necessarily 100% accurate to real life. In a novel, even one based on a true story, you've got a lot more leeway in how you approach things. In this particular case, when it comes to what you're describing, the one-liners and so forth, I would use those as little bits of color here and there. I'd scatter them around as color interspersed in the other stuff. I'm not sure what kind of stories you've got to work with, but if you're going at it from a biography point of view, I would try focusing on the relationship while fitting in the psychic stories in between, and trying to draw lines between them and events in the relationship. At least that's my thoughts on it. Now, we also have a couple other people who are saying, Kai Astra says that she's loving these videos. I've been fooling around with the idea of writing for years, and now I have the time. Their ideas and info are really helping me get one foot out in front of the other. We'll get my thoughts together, then post. Awesome. I also got a question on Facebook, I believe, from Kai. So I'm going to go have a quick look here. If I remember correctly, it was, where do I post? If you want to send stuff to me, you may as well just send it to basically my email address if you want me to comment on it. That would be tenhawk@gmail.com, tenhawk@gmail.com. You send stuff there and I'll check it over. I know you don't want to post your ideas up on Facebook because you're worried. Well, basically every author runs into that. I don't want to share an idea that I've just had because somebody else might run with it. Understandable. I've thought that exact same thing, and I have no doubt that other people have thought the same thing. And in many cases, like several at this point, I've been extremely glad that I didn't discover somebody else's novel before I'd written my own, because there's too many similarities. So it is definitely a concern, I understand. So yeah, send, if you want me to check it over and comment on it, you can send it to my email address and we'll see what comes up. Let's see, I'm looking through comments. Somebody asked if we'll eventually find out more about Scourwind. We will, just that series didn't make enough money for the publisher to pick it up, so it's just taking a while for me to get back to. This series. And Hobbies of Man says, this is definitely pushing me to finally get down to business and try to finally write something. LOL, keep up the great work. I'm glad. Come along. Get to work. If this is what you want, if you want to write, then now's the time. You know, we all need a distraction these days, it seems. I'm just going to go and have a quick look at the first video. I don't think there's any comments on the first video. To that degree, anyway. Okay, let's see. Great idea. Yada yada. Looking over the shoulder. Kathy says, I just completed my first novel and I'm terrified about searching for the next step. Well, the next step is getting it edited and getting it published. The question now becomes also getting good cover art for it. We're going to discuss that later. So the question now for you is going to be, have you got it edited? Did I say too many? Anyway. And how do you want to go forward with it? Do you want to try traditional publishing or do you want to independently publish? It's going to be two very different goals there. Traditionally published, you're going to want to just start plugging away. Expect to be rejected. It's going to happen. Harry Potter was infamously rejected, I think, 11 times, or was it more than that? The only time I ever sent a book off to a publisher, it was rejected instantly. Don't blame them. So, yeah, without knowing what you want to do going forward, that's all I can tell you at the moment. Let's see. Novels. I don't see too many other questions, so yeah, we're going to. That's going to be it for this episode. I know the whole writer's block thing was short. There's really not a whole lot to be done about writer's block, in my opinion, but it is important to know what your options are and really just to steadily chip away at it. So next time, we're actually going to probably start digging into actually laying down some different types of scenes. We're going to talk about action scenes, I think, at least. And more than likely, we're going to talk about writing different scenes and researching. Yeah, that sounds about right, I think. Can you tell I'm making this up as I go along? Actually, I do have a list somewhere, but I'm doing it really out of order. So yeah, until next time, I want you guys to have a good day, great day, stay safe, stay healthy, and if you want to be updated on this, click subscribe and ring the bell, yada, yada, yada. All right, guys, have a good one.